Welcome to Techtulia, Vidal and Matt coming to you from San Francisco and Guadalajara.
Guadalajara.
Vidal, welcome back. We're doing this by Skype
Thank you.
because we are socially, physically, internationally
There's-
isolated.
Mhm.
And today,
There's no way we can get sick from each other. So we're like at least 3,000 miles away, right?
I don't know exactly how far Guadalajara is, but it is. We're doing a great job today. We're not wearing masks, but we're inside. I have taken many fish tank cleaners and various powders.
How many
pills.
times do you think you wash your hands? Like
I wash my hands 6 or 7 times a day. I do like 2 happy birthdays, 3 happy birthdays. I'm prepared. I am like basically immune. I do not leave my house. But our topic today, I think, is appropriate because we're going to talk about work from home. I think, Vidal, you being in Mexico with Wiseline, who went work from home pretty early for Mexico and shut down the office. We can talk about how we prepared for that. We didn't know a virus was coming, but we had prepared for it in certain ways, and how it's affected you since the virus hit.
Yeah.
So today we're going to just talk about what are the best practices for working from home, how it affects our companies, how it will affect our clients. A lot of our clients are having to go remote for the first time, so we can talk about some of that experience we've had and what we're seeing on the ground or on our computers now. But then also I think just talk about the trend that this illness is going to accelerate, which is just everybody's going to start working from home more often. Not everybody, not all the time, but a lot of companies that had never considered working from home are now going to think about it.
Yeah, totally. I know our company is doing some of that consideration. So
yeah, that's the thing. We have taken certain people who used to come to the office and basically said, just don't plan on coming back because it was always marginal, and now that we've had to make the switch. But there's a lot of things that this impacts, and I think some good lessons for society about resilience and the fact that we had the systems in place to work from home and it didn't affect us that much, I think are things that make our company work well the rest of the time. So we're going to kind of consider all of those kind of bigger topics in terms of what do we think the long-term effects is going to be. Starting right off, we're just physically, what has had to change? What if we had to consider for our clients and for our employees in terms of just the physical IT infrastructure, like computers and screens and monitors and stuff?
Well, I guess speaking specifically about Wiseline, we had the advantage of everybody already had been working off of a laptop, so people were very mobile. There was also the advantage of having most of our systems work from a cloud environment, not only our own applications, but also the applications that we consume. Everything is cloud-based, and even the authentication to access to those systems is cloud-based. So in a way, a company like us and many technology companies are, if they started like recently operating, they most likely haven't invested like other companies in all the infrastructure, but our advantage has been that we kind of started as a very distributed team. Because if you remember, back when we started Wiseline, it was the team in San Mateo, California, and the team in Guadalajara. So from the get-go, we started using, there was even a tool, I don't know if you remember that, would take screenshots of you passively, right? You can have a mosaic or whatever. How do you
it was right before Slack came out, and we were playing with it. It was like something like a bubble. There's some name for it, and it just allowed you to feel like you were with the rest of the team when other people were in different places, and we kept experimenting with it. What do you think's been the hardest thing, even for us? We've had people work from home policy forever, where it's like people don't even have to tell us. We just say like, Slack in the morning, I'm not coming in, and it's basically cool. It's like discouraged to work from home always. Now it's you must work from home always. But what has been the hardest thing, even at Wiseline, that was prepared for this?
Well, I guess uh, besides the fact that working remote requires that everybody has a space, and it's been recently we ran a small survey, and the people that have more dedicated spaces to work from home reported that they would be happily to continue to work from home, right? But the other percentage, right, about 30 or 40%, said that they would like to come back to the office quite soon. And I think it's been a couple of things. One is having a dedicated space where you can actually go and work in a setup. And then second, we've been experimenting with some tools because connectivity across everybody in their homes has been a little bit here and there, right? Like there are people that have very good connection. There are others that struggle with video calling and things like that.
Yeah, I've heard of some people calling up. What is it now? Axtel went out of business. Who's
Yeah.
the main internet provider in Guadalajara?
You know what? That's a tricky question.
Is
From
it
what I
Movistar?
know, no, it's Axtel. Yeah, it's Axtel.
Whatever Axtel
But
became, but like people go in and upgrading their internet connections now that they've worked from home. They go in and they get the bigger package, so
yep.
that they get more guaranteed. Uplink, downlink, all that.
And I bet, so from my perspective, I bet what is happening with some of these big providers is somebody was saying, oh, every time my kids come back and in the afternoons they're starting to watch Netflix. Netflix is totally fine, but if I do a Zoom call, the Zoom call will be super choppy. So I think that especially in regions like in Mexico where working from home is not that big or people don't tend to work from home that often, major carriers were probably unaware of the kind of bandwidth footprint of applications like Zoom, and they probably established some quality of services rules for the major players like YouTube, Netflix. Like those are like the major uh, hoarders of bandwidth, if you will. But like we see quality of service issues with regular things like Zoom calls and even audio calls.
Well, Netflix, and they've probably already done this a while ago in Mexico, and they've done it in the US for sure, is they put boxes in the ISPs, which is the kind of the people that connect the last mile. They put a box in. And if you think about the Netflix, it's a lot of movies, but what's 1,000 movies? It's like each movie's like 8 or 9 gigabytes. They transcode it, so it's probably 100 gigabytes per movie of the different transcoded versions. And you have to do, so we're talking about terabytes, maybe. You can get terabyte hard drives for $300 now.
Yep.
I'm probably less since the last time I checked. So it's like, you put a big rack inside of an ISP, you can put all the, 95% of the content that Netflix has, and then it just has to serve that last mile. Whereas all the Zoom stuff has to go over the trunks. It starts looking at international trunks. Yep. And so, I think the United States has actually gone pretty well, but it's going to be a shock to a country like Mexico, where, I mean, even in our office 5 years ago, we had trouble keeping good internet connection.
I have to say that I've been more pleasantly surprised about our ability to do it from home without major internet issues. I mean, the first week I thought, like, if major tech companies around Mexico are doing this, if schools are out and kids are streaming video, there's going to be a major outage in Mexico. But no, I mean, we've been fine. There have been hiccups, but I think it's just normal.
Like, I'm sure YouTube has some fantastic caching for Baby Shark. I don't know is there like a similar?
Probably.
My niece, man, loves those videos. So you brought up that screenshot application. This is back in 2013. You were playing with it.
Yep.
But they said that there's been a huge surge. I've read online that there was a huge surge in companies basically trying to figure out how to make sure their employees were even at the computer, right? And so they would take over the screen and then take screenshots while the person's working, just to make sure that they're like there, right? And so you and I were talking before the episode, kind of chatting about this topic, and how you've managed engineers, you've managed hundreds of engineers for many years in remote situations. You have engineers in the US, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Mexico. So you can't be physically in the office to stand over their shoulder and make sure they're typing. What are the strategies that you have used to keep people motivated when you're not looking at them?
Yeah, so I was even talking about this with somebody else at Wiseline in a different context, but I believe that it starts by hiring the right people, especially. I mean, you don't need everybody to be self-motivated to jump and do work at every single moment in time, but you need to have people that care about what they do, and if you trust them and respect that they will do their best work with you, um, you basically don't need to micromanage in situations like this. And I know there are probably things that we're not doing correctly because there's a different way of managing humans when you are seeing them face to face. You can see if somebody's under stress, somebody's burned out, and things like that. So it takes a lot more communication. But to be able to run a company uh, with more trust and a little bit more remote work or disconnected asynchronous work, you need to trust your team, and it starts with the way you hire.
So what are the things that you look for? Because like just working with you over the years, like you have a very strong opinion about what type. Because even us, we've gotten into conflicts in the past where I really wanted to hire somebody, and you were like,
Yeah,
no, they're not going to work. And sometimes I got my way, and usually you were right,
yeah.
and that it didn't work out too well. So what are those like signals that you look for before you hire somebody? Like what are the things that tell you that this is someone who can work autonomously, who can keep their own calendar and keep their own work, and you just check in on them once a week to make sure that they're delivering. It's not like every day you're dealing with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to have a single kind of set of things that you can look for.
Well, what are your red flags? What are the things that you definitely? I mean, whether it's for remote work or any type of work, because you definitely have established a culture where people, they don't want to be checked in on. They want to just go deliver. It's not like people are waiting to see if the boss is looking, even when we were all in the office.
For example, I mean, I can tell you a very, very simple one. So there was a time when I used to interview engineers, and they would share their screen, right? And it was pretty evident when people did something that was okay in the real world. Like, let's say, let's think about how you solve this problem. They will Google it, right? But also, there are people that tend to like borderline cheat in the way they solve questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just a simple example, but there are like little hints that you can look for when you're interviewing somebody to tell a story about their integrity. And I think when you have people that have good integrity, you can trust them with a lot, right? And it starts like we have something at Wiseline where we talk about the culture and how this person can help us be better. And it's always about being responsive people, very respectful, good communicators, and sometimes those aspects of candidates really show down the line in situations like this, right? Like if somebody's respectful,
Mm-hmm.
good communication, and very proactive, you won't have an issue in situations like these.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen you find an engineer that you were really excited about who didn't have the skills, but they had the right attitude in the sense that they wanted to learn, they had high integrity, their goals were right, their skills. Yeah, it took them another 6 months. Sometimes we wouldn't hire them for 6 months or even a year later. Sometimes we would bring them in and really put in some training. But those are a lot of times your best people later on. But the people who are entitled, who talk a lot about like what's my position going to be and things like that. It's not that that's bad. It's obviously you have to have titles, and if someone's later in their career, you want to give it to them. But when you're listening for the focus of what is this person interested in, the people who are interested in doing a good, like just doing good work, are generally the people who also don't need to have a monitor in front of their face checking if they're at the computer. They like doing good work. That's a meaningful part of their lives. And
And you also need to find out, I mean, that they care about something that is truly meaningful, right? I mean, in the beginning, we're very small, and this would be a career-changing move for some of the people that we were interviewing. I mean, they should care about how Wiseline or any other company fits into their career. If for you this was just another job, I mean, that's fine. I mean, there are people like that around in the world, and nobody needs to just like be extremely excited to join a company, but there needs to be a show of meaning that you care for something at all. I mean, and especially around your career. Like you could be a software engineer and care too much about cooking. And sometimes I tend to say that's pretty cool. In the past, I would say like, no, I mean, if you're not a hardcore engineer and you're not reading about engineering all the time, I mean, cooking is nice. But now I see that people that just care about crafts and are very good at it and do things on the side are generally very good people to trust and just let them be proactive and do their work.
Yeah, it's funny that like some of the fastest people are some of the people you can't trust. Like the people that just like you see them on the first week and they pump out so much code, or they're so, but like they don't have that stability. And sometimes you want the people who are a little slower, who might be into like, yes, just like knitting or something.
Probably.
I feel like we had the most high tech, and I'm sure every tech company is like this, but we had the most high tech coffee setup. Like I just drink whatever trash. Like I'll drink the worst coffee at the office. I'm just like, as long as it's like at least lukewarm, I'll drink it. But some of these guys, they had the temperature and the V60 and all the. It was really quite an involved situation. But yeah,
and exactly. So that
you got to be focused.
Right in the head.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you hit it right in the head. It's like people care too much about everything that they did, even their coffee, right? Like when you see a team that like geeks out about the most specific thing about their coffee grinder, you're like, sometimes there are people that take it to the extreme, to a non-beneficial way. But when they care enough to do something really well, I think you have a good team.
Yeah. So, what are the things in Mexico? I mean, there's a lot of companies in Mexico that are not doing a great job at supporting this culture. Even if you hired the right people, they wouldn't be able to execute. What are some of the things you've seen in Mexico? Let's start with Mexico because everybody likes Mexico. Everybody put Mexico in the title of the video as well. So Mexico. What's Mexico missing in most companies? What do they not do well to support remote work, which they probably had to do in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah. So I think that if you've created a culture where you need to look over the shoulders of your employees to do something, then you cannot expect autonomy from them. Because, I mean, to have people work from their homes, sometimes their homes are full of distractions. The people that you've nurtured with, like, being on top of their shoulder just to make sure that they're doing their work, are probably going to second guess how their work fits into the whole picture of the company, and then get themselves lost. I mean, I once heard by somebody that said that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do a terrible job at work today, right? Like nobody does that in life.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, some people, especially some companies, nurture a do your worst job over here. And it's not because people naturally want to do a very bad job. It's because you've created a very toxic, defensive, and like, I need to be looked after to be able to do my job.
Yeah, and when we talk about autonomy and integrity, those are core concepts of getting the most out of a remote team or a team that you want to do complex work. When we talk about autonomy, it means it's very much like pull-based work, right? If you work at a factory line at Toyota, they let you pull your work. It's not like they have the work coming down the line, you have to work on it and then wait for the next one. You work at a speed that's comfortable for you, and then you pull the next item when you're ready, right? And so that very much in a factory line setting, that sort of autonomy means you work at a pace where you're going to do a good job, not you work at the right pace that we think is average, right? You might have someone who's really good, but they're a little slower, a little faster. That's fine. Give people control over their work. That's autonomy. And for a company that does complex types of work, like a tech company, or really, like anything where multiple people are interacting, you need to give people the ability to step up and have leadership, no matter what position they are in the company, so that if they're leading hey, we're organizing an office party, and it's the intern from the front desk. Maybe they need something from the CEO. They need to be able to ask people. They need to feel comfortable, open communication, open spaces, not go up the chain of command. And you need to give them the control to determine the final output. If you tell someone, hey, well, we need you to do this, but you need to do this step, and then this step, and then this step, and it's very prescriptive of how they do things, then you don't get autonomy. You get people trying to follow the rules. If you say, hey, look, I don't care what, like, if there's a party, like, I don't care what the party is like, as long as it's fun. You can get a mariachi, you can get, some food, you can get a clown or a band or whatever. You have control, but the final output has to be a great party, right? If you give somebody a very prescriptive notion of the steps they need to follow, and it's these complex style of work, and they don't have control over when things happen, how they happen, or how these pieces all combine for the final outcome, you're going to get poor quality in a regular office environment. But then when it's remote and the communication's harder and all of these things, that's when you get big breakdowns. For instance, if you tell someone, okay, do this step and then check in with me, in an office where they sit next to you, that might be okay. But when we're talking about having to send an email and set up a scheduled meeting and things like that remote, it just completely breaks.
Yeah, and let me tell you an example of what's happening within the family of somebody that works at a company that is not doing the right things. And then let me tell you, I guess, to start this conversation or this piece, I want to say that I think that when companies do the wrong thing for their employees to provide them with autonomous ways of working, when they resort to just like micromanagement and looking over their shoulder, I think two things could be, right? One is laziness, right? Like creating a culture that fosters autonomy requires more from the leaders, right? Like a leader needs to be able to say, well, I could put a camera in front of everybody that is going to be taking calls on a customer call center, right? To make sure that they're sitting on that chair and taking those calls, or I can monitor and instrument every single system that I have, and then look at where I have my people that have performance issues, fix those, or walk them out of the company. So here's the example, right? My sister-in-law works at a Teleperformance. I don't know if that's the name of the company, but it works at a call center, right? And call centers have this whole infrastructure on-site, managers walking those aisles, making sure that everybody is making those calls, right? They get sent home. They send her home with her physical desktop computer. And now she's found out recently that they're going to send cameras to every single one of their employees at home to make sure that they are in the chair taking the calls. And I'm like, that's weird. Doesn't this company know how many calls person A, B, or C are receiving? And you could tell who's actually taking the most calls and who's actually taking the least calls. And then potentially you can say, well, if somebody's taking the least amount of calls, you can ask them, hey, do you have any issues? By the way, do you have internet at home? What's going on, right? Before you go in and jump in with such like dark and extreme measures. And if there's a legitimate reason for this person not to be able to do their jobs, I get back to the premise of everybody wakes up every day thinking, I'm going to do a good job at work. Then you can probably find out what the real issue is. But if the issue is performance or laziness on any type of individual or group of individuals, you walk them out of the business. Like it's that easy, right? And then you hire actually the people that do want to do their job. So I think that when companies get to these like dark ways of kind of managing their teams, I think it's just probably out of laziness, and second could be out of not knowing other ways to handle a situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good cultural point, is that I think some companies, the culture is if a manager is very harsh, checks in, does a lot of micromanagement, is like always on top of their people, that's good management. And for me, that's lazy management, because it means you haven't put the detection systems in place to know if the outcome is good, right? Like if somebody's sitting there and they always have the headphone on and staring at the screen, you don't know what they're doing, right? You should be able to log how many calls. You should have a way to tell if the call was good or not. If somebody's doing a
Exactly.
really good job, you should have a way to give them more difficult calls or elevate their work, right? If you have like someone really good, how do you identify them and allow them to make a bigger impact, right? Like, if you're running a call center, you might have a customer who's working for, somebody needs to say what time it is. And you might have another customer who's resolving very expensive, lawsuits or something like that. And you need a much more dedicated and performant person. But if you haven't put those systems in place to tell how well a person's doing their job, then you're a bad manager. And second, if your way of getting your team motivated is to constantly be there yelling at them, well, guess what? You can't manage more than about 5 or 6 people. And I see many managers like this. They're these top-down, all-in-your-shit, all-the-time managers. And when they get a bigger team by, you double their team, it just all falls apart. Versus the managers who are managing on, hey, here's the standards. We're going to check your output. We're not going to check how you're doing the work. We're checking if the work is actually good, if the output is good. And we're going to support a culture that, again, allows people to lead even if they're not in charge, allows people to kind of make their own way. That's a lot of work. There's a lot of communication, a lot of systems, a lot of process, a lot of measurement, and then a daily effort to keep people feeling good. But those are the teams where you could go from 20 people to 400 people, and you don't have to hire 100 managers. You have to hire, maybe 10 or 12 managers, but you can really get that very strong. I mean, Google was like that. People had like manager ratios, and obviously they were printing money, but like 80 to 1. Like there was just basically no management because they did, very much hire people who just were excited about the job. Again, printing money makes that a lot easier, but everybody can think that that's actually the ideal, not, checking in on people constantly.
Yeah, and another thing is, and we see that at Wiseline Steel because people come from other companies where that was not rewarded, but the fear of speaking up to do change or to do things outside of your normal work, and that's probably not very intuitive when it comes to how does that relate to remote work. But like if you don't have a team that is invited to be resourceful, to fix things for themselves, when you have a situation like this, you have people that will sit and complain and say, I cannot do my job because the company hasn't provided me with X, Y, and Z. And if you look at some of the conversations over Slack at Wiseline, people are figuring out, giving each other like advice on how to set up even their home router. It's like, oh, I'm using this DNS, but it's being a little bit slow. What would you recommend for me to be faster, right? Where many other cultures will say like, oh, IT, let me ring them because I'm having an issue and I need to do my job, right? So
I think, and that's not even related to being an engineer, because there's companies where engineers are so like they've culturally isolated them that it's like I don't touch that. I'm an engineer. Like I do this. I'm like a front end engineer. I don't touch a back end. I don't touch. It's like people start defining themselves in a way that it's like, yeah, those are your expertises, but instead of it using that as a strength that they share with people, it becomes something that isolates them and limits the amount of work they can do. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good segue to looking at the opportunity for companies to use the coronavirus, or countries, or whatever organization you're in. And everybody's, we're talking about software engineer because that's what we do. That's the kind of people that work in our company. But if you're working in a company that has never let you work from home before, but you're doing documents or things like that. If you're turning tools, you're SOL. Mm-hmm. But if you had a job always that could have worked from home, and then your management finally says, okay, we have to work from home, I don't know, 2 more months, 3 more, who knows how long it'll be before, Donald Trump figured for the United States. AMLO or Donald Trump, I'm just like, who's gonna figure it out first? But we might be doing these things remote until December. Yeah, until either everyone gets it or somebody comes with it. But over that time that you're stuck not coming into work, if you adopt and if companies move in the direction, I think it's not only great for, when you come back to work, a better work environment, but there's market share. For the companies that have been able to adapt really quickly and who've taken an intrinsically flexible business or an intrinsically flexible business culture, they're having a great time right now, right? And you look at a company like Amazon, which I think is, always figuring out how to do things as cheap as possible. Maybe just use that. You could talk about their labor practices, but they're very innovative. Right. They use a lot of technology, and they keep all of their processes as simple and cheap as possible. Mm-hmm. Now that everything's changing, they're able to change very quickly. Whereas the companies that have more restrictive ways of working, I read an article about toilet paper. Let me give you an example of toilet paper. This is good content. So all the toilet paper is getting sold out in the U.S., right? Oh, hold on. So these companies that make toilet paper, everyone's like, oh, toilet paper, like these people carrying out like all the toilet paper, hoarding it. There's no toilet paper at the store. Well, it turns out you use like half of your toilet paper at work, when you're outside the house, and there's an entirely different market for commercial toilet paper and for home toilet paper, right? They're just different products. So you've seen it, like the ones at Wiseline, there's like those giant rolls that are just enormous, and the really thin paper. It's not the good quality stuff.
Pretty bad.
And at home, you have the little rolls, right? And so it's a totally different companies. Procter & Gamble in the United States makes the home toilet paper, and Warehouse or some other companies make the commercial stuff. And so now that everyone works from home, they buy all of the home toilet paper, but no one's buying any of the commercial toilet paper. And it's just a good example of an industry that has broken itself up and made every little piece so particular. And it's like, well, we're a commercial toilet paper company and we're a home toilet paper company. And it makes it so that even now toilet paper is completely run out. Only the home toilet paper companies have the wherewithal to make changes, right? And so and I think the point here is that you do not want your company to look like the toilet paper industry. I think that's a fair
over specialization. Is that what you're
over specialization, running really thin margins, focus on efficiency for efficiency's sake, and like that's like just to return the toilet paper analogy to work, is that I think a lot of managers focus on how much work am I getting out of my employees, rather than how much integrity does our group have? How are we able to do everything that we set out to do? And do we accomplish everything we said we're going to do? And are we committing to things that we absolutely are going to accomplish? There's risk and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people would prefer that their employees are always busy rather than their employees are consistently improving the quality of and standards that they have, right? And so if there's a little bit more flexibility baked in, right? And there's a lot of ways to bake in flexibility to your company. One is, if you're getting 60 hours a week out of your employees and you think that that's the right thing to do for a year, like that doesn't work. Like you can't get 60 hours a week out of your employees week in, week in, unless there's like some, when we started Wiseline, we worked everybody to death because we knew it wasn't sustainable, because the only thing that could happen is either we all work this hard or we go out of business. So it really wasn't a matter of sustainable or not. But over time, we really had to engineer a lot better time off, reduce the number of hours, just because, if people work for you for 8 months and then quit, you don't really build a company on that. And then second, I think much more accessibility and support for people in their personal lives.
And I think in times like this,
exactly,
the right companies do the right thing. And then the companies that have had poor management skills will shine for that in a pandemic, right? And people will remember how you treated them in a time like this, and will probably, when the opportunity comes, leave you for the next company.
Yeah, it's like if you don't allow people to take time off for being sick, right? Like that's stupid, number one, during a pandemic, because they're going to get everybody else sick, and so that's dumb. But it just shows that you value efficiency and just like getting that little extra piece of work out versus making that person someone who can work autonomously because they care so much about the company and the culture that you built, and they want to just see it keep going, right? They enjoy working. It supports their life. It supports their kids. They feel well treated and respected, and work is meaningful for them. Right. And if you would trade a meaningful, dedicated employee where their work, they love it, they want to, if you're going to trade that for slightly more work output or slightly lower expenses, you become the toilet paper industry. And that is companies that, even though they produce toilet paper, they can't switch from the big rolls to the small rolls. And so toilet paper shelves are empty. Companies are going out of business. The whole thing's a mess. Versus if you're the Amazon, I mean, like people complain about Amazon's labor packages because they're not unionized, but Amazon, this thing hit, they raised everybody's wages by $2 an hour. they were using so much automation and data to optimize their workflows. They were keeping all of their equipment bare bones and still relying on people. They didn't over automate, but they used intelligent automation and kept a lot of people in the loop. And that was because for years they've just taken one over industry and they've added more products or different product lines, attack new markets, added changes all the time. So that was a company built around change. And so I don't know exactly what their culture is internally, but it was a company dedicated to being resilient and not efficient.
Yeah.
And I think more and more the profitable companies are going to be the resilient companies that are able to attack new markets or move to profitable markets rather than maximize the amount of profit in a commoditizing industry that's just going to become the lowest bidder.
Another example that has been pretty impressive to me, and another company that gets a pretty bad reputation when it comes to how they treat their employees, is Tesla. And Elon Musk announcing that they will provide respirators for everybody around the world when they need them. Is like, that's a car company last time I checked, right? So, I mean, they were able to somehow re-instrument their workforce, I think they production lines.
I think they just bought some and then slapped the Tesla.
You think so?
Yeah, I think that's what happened. But your point is really good. If you inspire your employees with a higher calling, even if it's just, hey, this is a great place to work. People love working at Tesla. I don't think because of the respirators, but because they feel that they're saving the whole world, right? And again, that is a company that can have a whole bunch of weird stuff happen, and they were always able to be flexible because they have employees that don't work there for the money. They need to get paid, but they work there because they believe in the mission. And all of these are pieces that people should be considering right now. Like, what should I be doing? Like, what should this crisis be teaching me? And if you were more flexible, if we come out of this and all these companies learn from having to be flexible in response to coronavirus and think, wait, now that we've put in place a lot of these processes and IT equipment and cultural changes that allowed us to be resilient in the face of the coronavirus, that's actually going to be a company that can be resilient in the face of market competition or entering new markets or any kind of global downturn. And it's just good practice. And it's like, everybody looks super smart being the hard ass manager, the guy who does all the stock buybacks but leaves no cash bank for cash for your company. As soon as the crisis hits, though, all those people get washed out, and that's probably what's happening right now. We'll see which companies survive and which fail over the next couple months.
Yep, totally.
So, if you made it this far in the episode, we're getting down to you're probably about 3/4 of the way done with your Lopez Mateos commute. Although it's probably a really good commute on Lopez Mateos these days.
Right now, yeah. Probably, I mean, it's it used to be an hour for me, and now it's like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I remember when we were working at the beginning, when we go to work at 9 a.m., it would take us an hour to get into Punta Sao Paulo and then 12 minutes to get home. But we stop for tacos. But if you got this far, we're going to, I think, try to extend the topic just last little bit, which is looking at cultures that are about rewarding people for great work or punishing people for poor work, right? And so I think, the call center mentality is do enough calls, we'll fire you, not, hey, how do we do a great job at making all of these calls? Or even like Uber. Like, there's no way to get promoted at Uber, right? You get a 5-star rating, but the only way it can go for you is it goes down. Otherwise, and that kind of makes sense because I like to think of like the school bus driver example, right? What do you want out of your school bus driver? For them to try to get to, you have 20 kids in the back of a school bus, and for them to try to get to school 10 minutes faster, no, just never crash. That's the rule for school bus drivers. That's a very conservative type of outlook. They're worried much more about the negative than the positive. But I would say that 90%, and any company that currently has people working from home, for instance, should be thinking about switching their culture to be one much more of how can I get the most out of people, which doesn't mean the most work. It means what is the biggest thing that our company can do, and how do we encourage people to not worry so much about failure and instead put more of their effort into the upside.
Yeah, and if you think that remote work is hurting your productivity, first think about the systems that you didn't put in place, both be it IT systems, management systems, like even like checking in with everybody in the morning. Like one of the systems that we have with one team is like everybody says good morning whenever they're online, right? Like we don't assume that you're online and bother you. You say, I'm online, I'm here.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Right?
Talk about the tools that you're building right now around certifications. Because at Wiseline, I think one of the things that we wanted is that, some people want to work harder and you can try to find ways to get them to work 60 hours a week, but that's not always available. It's not always the best use of their time. But if you do have those people that want to gain skills, we give them the ability, we give them the ability to like, hey, yeah, you want to go become an Amazon certified AWS? Well, it's Amazon and AWS are kind of separate. I think Amazon's waiting for AWS to get monopoly out of their company. But say you want to get AWS certified at Wiseline, what happens?
So we have talk about autonomy, right? So we encourage people to get certified, but then we just provide them with tools. Like they organize their time in the way they want to do it. They organize their schedule in the way that suits their current project and assignment and their own personal life. And then they consume the learning resources that we have available for them. And then they go and present their exam. And we suggest a certain path of certification, but everybody is free to choose whichever suits them better.
And so say somebody never put any time into certification, they got other stuff going on in life, what happens to them? What's the downside?
What do you mean?
Like, do you get fired if you don't do enough certifications in a year?
No.
Exactly.
No, but it's a reward system where like, it's not like we reward people that get certified. We sometimes tend to celebrate it because it's cool. It helps us as a group get a different status when it comes to the partnership with these cloud providers. But everybody sees this as a great achievement, and everybody wants to mimic that. It's more of a collective. We all want to do better at doing our jobs rather than let's push people in aggressive ways to get it done.
And so, and this is exactly what I'm talking about upside. So basically, you don't need to get any of these certifications. But if we get the certifications, it helps us get new business. It helps them. They can be on different projects that are more interesting to them because we even had somebody who was like a project manager, someone who was in a non-technical, they were not a programmer, and they got an architecture certification. And that is something that they chose to do in their career. It's going to help them for the rest of their career because I think cloud and learning AWS and just knowing more about it is valuable. But it was something that they choose and they are now aspiring for the upside. Is there any limit? Obviously, everybody's working day to day on doing a great job on their projects and just becoming a better engineer. But is there any limit to how many certifications you can get or the kind of, you can get different statuses on these cloud platforms? Like,
no, but definitely, sky's the limit. And technologies are popping here and there almost on a daily basis. So we partner with a company that does payments, right? Like a big payment provider, and they also have their certification. So I think that the cool thing about working in a technology company as well is, and I was talking about this with an engineer the other day, is like similar to what doctors do, like engineers are pretty used to learning on a constant basis because obsoleteness will kill your career. Like you could be a pretty good, probably diesel mechanic and not pick up a book for 10 years and be totally fine, right? Because diesel technology is not going to leave you behind. Some things here and there.
But if Tesla has its way, right?
Right, exactly. But in technology, unless you are educating yourself on a weekly basis, you're going to be left behind. Myself, I've been trying to get back into coding, and it's scary. Like I haven't done it in 4 years, bad on me, and it's quite scary.
Yeah, and I think when we think about what are the main things that cause people to leave a company, a lot of people just feel like the other company is the next big step for them. It's about them making that next move, and if you have a team focused on who is going to be the big boss of everyone else, that's the only way you can achieve things.
Right.
If you have a manager ratio of 10-1, then only one person out of those 10 can get promoted. Like that's it. On the other hand, if you focus on what is the output of that person, what are the kinds of things that they can deliver, how do we reward people for doing more, and how do we give them a way to always increase the quality of their work and increase the the standards of their output, you can have unlimited upside. Or you can be a company that's very flexible, but you have to create a game that isn't focused on how much money you make, because you'll eventually run out of money if that's the only thing that people value, or if who's in charge, because you can only have one person in charge of X number of people. If you instead make it about what is the quality of our work? How can we produce the best quality? Who's producing the best? Who is learning the most? Who has the most integrity in terms of the quality of their work, and are they going to deliver on time for a customer and all that stuff? If you focus on those metrics and you make the game about that, you can have a team that has very little kind of top-down management, and instead, you're much more focused on how do we provide more training material? How do we get customers who are more interesting? How do we think bigger in terms of the impact of our products?
And that's another aspect. You're touching on a very good point, which is another aspect of great companies is they don't define value of an individual to the organization in terms of their position in the organizational chart. Mm-hmm. Like a company that is very good has ways for everybody around the company, even the newest person, probably an intern, to have a sizable impact in the organization and provide value. That way you get more engaged employees because they say like, oh, great, I don't need to be a manager and deal with all those things of management and leadership that I don't like or I'm not perfect for, yet I can still continue to do meaningful work here and provide an impact both to the company as well as to society. But if your kind of career ladder success for your employee looks like getting into management and being a leader and just bossing people around, you don't attract the best talent. You don't provide ways for people to really provide impact and value to your customers. And you end up with this autocratic companies that do things like installing spyware and cameras so that people sit into their chairs and do their job.
Yeah, and so we got to wrap up soon. But if we think about, none of these things are achievable. You can never have a company with no management and no career progression and stuff like that. It's like really not a credible outcome. But you can minimize it. You can't. You should have a company that doesn't fetishize how much work a manager gets out of his team. Instead, you fetishize the quality. Fetishize, like, if you're going to think about one thing, think about, are we doing a really good job? Are we minimizing costs? Are we maximizing the value for our customers? Which I think a company like Amazon has always made front and center. It's like, we want the cheapest, best products for people. And that has allowed them to just take over. They haven't made a ton of profit over their lifetime, but they've taken over all these industries and they have a tremendous amount of power to continue to be in a dominant position. And if you make it so that there's only very few ways to win and there's a big downside if you're going to lose, that's when you get these companies that nobody really wants to work unless they're forced to. And I think if we pull back, and we got to finish up, but if you pull back to society, we look at a country like Mexico versus the United States. Obviously, the United States has a very punitive penal system, and there's a lot of poor people. But I think in Mexico, the downside for getting fired from your job is much bigger than in the United States. And if you're in the United States, you can say like, "Oh no, the United States is worse." But like, there's very little safety net in Mexico. If you lose a good job, that's it for a lot of people. It's not going to come back, and it's like a country that's continually has a large portion of its population in a recession. And so everybody's trying to keep their job. And I think the impact of that is that it's a society that losing is such a big problem that everyone's more focused on maintaining their status than on getting more productivity or a better quality outcome.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that it's also hindering our ability to really do our best work. So I think as a society in Mexico, we need to find ways so that even in situations like these, people can move and do something different. I know it's hard here as it is hard in every other country and economy, but especially here in Mexico, where a lot of what powers this economy is manufacturing and building of physical goods. When situations like these happen, it's inevitable that it hits us really, really hard. So, I mean, I think that if we move into an economy that is more towards services, and you see Germany and Japan and other economies doing that, you have more flexibility, because if you're only living in the physical world and a lot of your economy resides on manufacturing, things like these will hit you extremely hard.
Yeah, and the peso's getting killed because of oil too. It's like
Yep.
the cultural changes that make companies work, I think, make countries work a lot better too. Because if it was like, okay, well, we just need to pump as much oil and we'll let the people be kind of poor and uneducated, it was kind of maybe like the PRI of the 80s and 90s. And instead, you said, no, actually, giving people a lot more, good roads, good hospitals, good education is going to make the country much more stable. Then when oil tanks, like it has in the last couple of weeks, Mexico wouldn't really feel it. In the United States, we don't know whether good oil is good if it goes up or down, because we do have an oil sector that produces a lot like Mexico. But we also have such a big economy on the side. And if we look inside the United States, I think one of the big issues, at least on the Democratic side over the primary season, has been, do we provide universal medical care? And I think even as much as Mexico should aspire to be much more like the United States and kind of building human capital and giving people a lot more ability to have autonomy and, different career paths, the United States is killing itself because medical care is so expensive that people can't start companies. Our company formation rate, which has traditionally been, the backbone of the United States economy, is it's innovative, it starts new companies, technology companies, because those are always kind of at the forefront. That's slowed down tremendously, and part of it is because, like, even for someone, in my position, if I didn't have my wife having medical care that covers me, like, I don't know if I would be able to go off and start a company, right? It would be, it limits people. And so it's like, we have seen concretely in this crisis and in our own companies that giving people a foundation where they're safe and encouraging them to experiment and take risks and having systems in place that allow them to benefit from producing great results for the company. Like a salesman who just gets a bonus if they go get $10 million in business. It's like, if you're going to go get a $10 million deal once a year, maybe that's enough for you. It's better than making $100,000 every month and me making $1.2 million for the year. And similarly, society should have a way not just to reward people who make a lot of money because they become billionaires, but actually just to set a bar and a foundation so that, the average person can have a lot lower risk if they go and take 6 months off to try to go into a new career or to get a new degree or to learn some skill or to start a company. And it's kind of like stifling our economies because we think, I think there's a lot of people who believe that if you ever gave any people a break and if they got anything for free, if they got free education or free healthcare or free housing or even cheaper housing, everything's too expensive in the US. The society would just collapse and everyone would stop working and become freeloaders. And I think it's actually the opposite. I think there's people that are going to be like that. You're going to deal with them, but you really want to focus on allowing the most upside for the most people, the most flexibility and resilience and autonomy. And you can't have autonomy if someone's forced to get a factory job just to make sure they don't starve to death or lose their house or die of like some infection.
And they're draining all of their potential just to get by.
Yeah, it's like, we have geniuses who are just stuck because, not like they have to be like some crazy genius, but like people who could do some really interesting things, but who are limited by the companies they work in, and they're limited by the society that, especially in Mexico, you just have to immediately go into some very sometimes shitty career just because it's a lot better than the 10% chance of starving or, all the bad stuff that happens. Right?
Yeah, I think they interviewed the guy that does Dilbert, the comic, and he works a very boring IT job. And there you have a guy that is extremely smart to tell very intelligent jokes, I guess, from the context of what he sees in his workplace. But like him, there's probably artists, musicians that are undiscovered because, hey, I guess I need to do this boring job. They don't
have like 2 months to take off because they would lose their house and their healthcare and their rent. It's like we got to create like a little more cushion at the bottom. Is not just about helping people and being bleeding heart. And it's about like, look, if we're running an economy that is like literally collapsing right now because, if anything changes, we're not allowed to change any of our laws that are punitive. We're not allowed to do new things as a society. And when a crisis like Corona hits, we're so inflexible because we're just trying to make every last dollar. And if you stop making dollars, you're going to lose your house, and your wife's going to divorce you, and your kids aren't going to do the good school that you want, and everything collapses. And it's like, that's not a society that produces innovative work. That's a society that produces automatons. Mm-hmm. I have a funny story. So you remember, the original IBM computers, before they had like RAM. I don't know what RAM's made out of now, like transistors and stuff, right? But back then, they had these ferrite core memory systems. You know what these are? Okay. So they run electricity, and if they run electricity through two wires simultaneously, they can change the magnetic field inside a small magnetic ring, and then that stores until you reverse it, the magnetic field stays in that, and so it can store stuff. And that's how you used to store stuff. So you can change each one of these little rings. It looks like it's like a woven. Like when you weave like a rug or something like that. It's like a whole bunch of crossing lines, and on each of the crosses of each of the wires, you have a tiny little ring, and that's how they store stuff. That's how they stored instructions and all kinds of stuff on the Apollo missions, and then the IBM 360 system. The first ones used these storage devices that were these ferrite cores, and so the way that you make more and more memory is by making the ferrite cores a little smaller. I'll get back to like the main point of the episode. It's coming real quick. So you make the ferrite cores smaller and smaller and smaller. So they would get them down. Originally ones that were like 1/2 inch across, and then they made them 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch. The computer industry is making smaller and smaller, mm-hmm. faster and faster. And eventually they made them so small, they could not get the wires through. And it became a huge issue because it took forever to build these things because you had to like wire it through, and you couldn't make it any smaller. And it was actually the people who figured out how to make the memory faster were not the software engineers or the architects or designers. It was actually the machinist on the floor, because they knew that if you snap the wire in half, what happens is you pull it, right? And you snap it in half. Like you just pull the copper wire, whatever wire was made out of, you snap it. At the end of it actually got really hard, and it was an annealing process that happened while you stretched it. Wow, and so not only would the end get really hard, but it would actually get thinner because as you stretched it out, as you snapped it. And so they made a machine that would just snap the end off of these things, and it would make these very sharp points that were much harder and stiffer. And by that means, they made the size of the memory cores like 10x smaller, and became the leading memory core producer in the world, among other things. But it was a huge part of IBM's success in the 360 system, which became the biggest computer system ever sold. And it came down to giving not just the big bosses who understood marketing or the smart guys who understood this, but just people like machinists more flexibility. And I think I'm making a big point here, but when we look at like the people who are delivering food and picking food and all that, those are the only people left working. The nurses who used to get very little respect are now keeping society from collapsing, people from dying. The people who work at grocery stores who got very little respect 6 months ago are now, people realize that that's like the core of our foundation. It's like, let's have companies that just reward creativity and reward all work, not just fetishize, these taskmasters and bankers who are able to squeeze the last dollar out of everything. Or even people like us who are just like, they think they know it all. It's like, let's have a more resilient.
Yeah, no, I think you also point to something, which is this situation in this pandemic will probably show us what's really essential, both in business and in life. Like the essential things will need to continue. The things that we were doing is like, I could have stopped that, not spend on that, not do all these things. Will probably either change or go away because they were actually nice things that were not needed.
Or they're going to figure out how to make like a wearable that figures out how fast you're typing, and everyone's just going to be wearing all of those in a year, and we'll live in a hellhole like a 1984.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's the limit of time we have for today. To everybody's listening on Anchor, or if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and follow. We did a live episode. We might do some of those in the future. Let us know. You can comment if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Just let us know how we did. Tell us what to do next. We had a lot of fun last time when we did a live episode, and people giving us ideas. We love it. We would do more episodes, and we would be more frequent if we had more ideas from you guys. So check us out on Twitter. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. Anything else, Vidal?
All good. Thank you for listening.
All right. Talk to you next time. Bye.